You remember I got an award?
You got an award?
Yeah, I made the most errors.
Fred, that's something I would forget.
I'm proud of it. There was a fellow, Billy Watkins. He was a writer for many years for the Jackson, Mississippi Clarion Ledger. I'd known Billy for 20 years, and he decided to write a book. He titled it, I think, Unsung Heroes of Apollo. And I told Billy when he got into that, I wrote the foreword for it, that it was going to be a big problem, and it'd probably be a furor, because if he really wanted to write about all the unsung heroes, it'd be an infinite number of volumes to cover it, and he had to pick and choose. And he also had a criteria. He wanted to be able to interview the persons that he was going to incorporate in the book. And one person I feel badly about, he missed clearly, that was with us a lot, was Bill Tyndall. He was sort of the czar of software, but he was also probably the best handler of dredging out the brains of a large number of people in the room in what was called data priority meetings, where there might be an assemblage of 60, 70 people. And you know, some people are shyer than others and don't speak up as loud, but he had the capability of draw out of people their ideas, because these meetings were to talk about and figure out how to do things or approach to things that had never been done before, with flight procedures, with rules about burns, when to take over, if the automatic system's straight, those kind of things. So there's a lot of live discussion in those meetings, and of course Bill Tyndall had passed away at the time he was writing this book, so Bill was not incorporated, but it went on and on. I can mention many. And there were so many people we did not get to meet in different jobs. For instance, after Apollo, I went into the Orbiter Program Office, and a fellow I worked for, Aaron Cohn, gave me responsibility for the budgets we gave to E&D, which Max Faget's engineering operation at Johnson. So I got to meet people down, because they wanted their money, so I got to meet people down to section level in order to be division, branch, section. So I got to meet a lot of people in the engineering world that in many cases we never got to meet in a similar way, that made major contributions. The other side of things, that after I left NASA, became a contractor, I was involved in actually we won a contract for shuttle processing at Kennedy, to turn around the shuttles. And NASA gave us a year and provided trailers for us down by the Launch Control System to look at their whole ground process, because that was a part of the job I got. Lockheed had the vehicle. But I went in every little dirt road at Kennedy, and there were operations at many of these. So there was a whole ground side of the operation, for instance, at Kennedy, that we never, literally day to day, ever interfaced with. We were mostly with people handling the flight hardware or involved in tests. So it's just hard, really, to call out the people who had did a contribution, because there were so many. And as it's already said, this thing would not have happened, and we would not have got there and back without a lot of people being involved and doing their job. And it's very highly motivated. Remember one night in the LIM, troubleshooting, 1967 and 68, test operations at Grumman went 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, shut down Christmas Day, 1 day each year. And these people went 12-hour shifts. And I remember some young kid from Brooklyn was in there one night, and he was messing around with some instrumentation wire and changing it while we were testing. I could smell it. And he turned around, he just looked at me and said, I don't know why you'd want to go to the moon. He said, but he said, sir, I tell you, he said, I'll do the best job I can to make sure you get there and back. And that was kind of the attitude we had in the program.
Hey, Fred, he did his job very, very well. You got there and back.
Yeah.
When you think back of those days, it was before we had time to play baseball out at Rockwell. But living with those folks, it reminds me, brings back time and time again how different things are today. And I think that difference really accounts for the success. As you look back on it, we lived with the spacecraft. I cannot tell you how much time I spent at Rockwell. Back in 60, I think I started going out there in 64 sometime, but almost all of 65. I was on the road 275 days one year, I remember. And we were, well, nobody ever heard of the Apollo 2 crew, which got canceled after 6 months, and then we're back up on Apollo 1, then we had the fire investigation and all the rebuilding and all of that. And we lived with the design engineers out there. I don't know how many times Frank Borman and I usually worked together on the testings, 24 hours a day. They put some bunks in the bay areas out there at the Rockwell plant, and it'd be in the middle of the night, 24 hours a day. Frank and I would go up, and when they got through fixing something, installing something, then we'd get a call, we'd wake up, we'd go down and sit in the spacecraft. It was the only way, incidentally, we could get any cockpit time. We had no real simulators. They had kind of a simulator out at Rockwell that they'd let us use from time to time, but most of it was gained from living with the engineers, being part of the design review boards, and whatever that went on. And then, when it came time to get ready really getting ready for the mission, we were on the flight crew for a long, long time. I think we were assigned about 3 weeks after the Apollo 1 fire, and we were living with it. We ended up flying a spacecraft that had been so decrepit, really, for the Apollo 1 fire. And I need to tell you that those of us that had worked with the command module up until that time, we knew that it had deficiencies. We were so, maybe ego-driven, it's not quite the right word, but we thought we could overcome. We didn't let anything go on that we didn't think we could compensate for individually. But we probably overestimated that, and that's what happened. They had the fire, and when they had to do all the changes to avoid having another fire, there was also an umbrella under which we were able to get so many operational things, so many cockpit kind of fixes in that we couldn't get in before because of the schedule delay. The priorities in those days had 3 priorities, really. And it was cost, schedule, and crew safety. And probably the highest priority, I should have put that in a different order. The highest priority was schedule, then crew safety, and then the cost, as we know that. In any event, we ended up flying. We got the glory. I kind of like that. But the real reason it was successful, I have to tell you, it wasn't successful because of us. It was successful because of the engineering, the operations, and the management at the time. Decisions were made differently. Sometimes we disagreed. Sometimes the crew disagreed with some of those decisions. But I have to hand it to them. It ended up being very successful. As you look back now, it looks impossible in the current environment to do anything similar at all on that kind of schedule, even at that kind of cost. And our lives were dependent on all of those people. And I have to tell you, or confess for myself, in those days, I didn't appreciate it enough. It's only as we've gotten older, and I've had the perspective to look back, do I fully appreciate it. And of course, they're dying off right and left. I can't even remember the names of these guys. this is Duke. I know. But the operations, the people that worked in mission control, for example, I will tell you about one incident, because last Saturday I went to a memoriam. Actually, it was a party at a house for John Llewellyn. I'm sorry. Those of you who knew John, he was kind of a wild guy. He was retro. He was a retro officer. Did a great job. Wild. There's nothing smooth ever about John Llewellyn. And the story that makes me so emotional, just to give you a background on some of these people, because the average age there was about 27. I heard somebody say something yesterday. It was 27 there in mission control during those days. Last year, John, I don't know why he picked me, but he sent me a draft of a biography. He was coming out with an autobiography. And as I got into it, there were things about John Llewellyn I had never known. And I'm sure it was true of all of those guys, or they would not have had the kind of dedication they did. John was a Marine on the ground in Korea. Back in the days before the Chosin Reservoir, I was flying an F-3D in the air, and I always remember looking down and thinking, God, I don't know if I could do that job on the ground. John got wounded, I think, 4 different times. Held a hill, got overrun by the Chinese, ended up having to use his bayonet to kill the guy that fell on top of him. They kept coming. He spent the whole night not wanting to move because he's afraid that they would all come back and kill him there. Just amazing thing. Those were the guys that were dedicated to keeping us alive. I'm so glad I went to that memorial get-together, because it was a party. John Llewellyn there was always beer. It was at John Llewellyn's daughter's house. The mission control guys, everybody was there. They all had a story to tell about John. But that's how those guys stood out to me. I'll never forget that story.
My memories similar in mission control. I got to work in a lot of mission control, Apollo 10, 11, Capcom, and then as backup crew twice. You also were in mission control during the mission, so we got to see the dedication of not only the guys in the trench, the flight controllers, but also the support guys behind out of the room. And then I remember also our suit techs, the guys that kept our suits ready to go. They were really dedicated. And the simulator instructors. It was their job to make sure we were trained in every aspect and every phase of flight. And they made it tough on us. Everybody out there's probably been killed 300 or 400 times in the simulator. Because they wanted you to be able to overcome any emergency. Those are the people that I remember. I remember some names. It's not, we all say it's not looking at the names, it's the people and the focus that everybody had to do the job. And I think everybody that worked on Apollo had a desire, this thing's not going to fail because I screw up. So everybody wanted to do a job that would be a job well done.
Hey Charlie, I just found out yesterday that Joe Schmidt's still kicking at 96, one of our suit techs.
For those of you who don't know Joe Schmidt, if you've ever seen Norman Rockwell's painting,